The first proposal is to introduce bus and cycle lanes on the roads coming into each of the trouble spots, but I'm not really sure that that will solve the problem by itself.
What do you mean? I think it's a really good idea. I think it would help a lot.
On the face of it, yes, but in actual fact, it can make things worse. There've been a few studies of towns and cities where they've put schemes like that into operation, and one serious problem is that car traffic tends to go off into the areas around town where people live, and that causes more traffic in places where there haven't been problems before. Drivers think they can find emptier roads in residential areas, and it just sends the problem there instead.
I hadn't thought about that. What about the second one? A park and ride scheme?
Well, we build car parks on the edge of town where the main roads come in. When cars come into town from further out, they can park there cheaply and take special buses into the town center. It's been quite popular in a few other towns around the country.
In some places, yes, but not in all. I've had a look at some of those schemes. The main problem is lack of take-up. Drivers just don't use them. A lot of these car parks stay empty for a long time, and the buses are often less than half full. It's not always a good use of public money, especially when drivers avoid using the services and prefer to come into town and pay higher parking fees.
You've got a point there. We need to bear that in mind. Do you think either of the other proposals would work? I think the pedestrian area is a very interesting proposal. We could turn the whole of the center, including the shopping areas, into a pedestrian zone and put in a one-way system round it.
I'm not convinced that would work. You'd move all the traffic further out of the centre and cause more problems. But the biggest problem would actually be with the shops themselves. It's fine to stop traffic around the shopping areas, but there would be huge problems with deliveries. Some shops could go out of business if they have difficulty getting lorries in with their goods.
Right. I'll note that as well. The last one is a new tram system. We'll have to lay down a new line through the center of town, and also from north to south. It's quite a popular solution to traffic problems.
That may be so, but the main problem with that kind of project is the expense. The initial financial requirements would be huge, and so would the maintenance expenses. It might well be far more than the council is prepared to spend on a solution.
I'll note that as well, which brings us to the next point, the question of cost. I've got the details on the cost of each of these projects. The tram system comes out as the costliest. It would cost over £20 million just to prepare the route and to lay the lines down, including widening the roads. Then there's the cost of buying the trams themselves and organizing the system.
And what does it all come to?
No less than £30 million in the end. At least that's what they need to try to keep the cost down to.
£30 million? That does seem a lot. I thought it was closer to 25 million, but clearly it isn't. And what about the cheapest?
Well, it seems that it'd be either the bus and cycle lanes plan or the park and ride scheme. At the moment, it looks like the bus and cycle lanes might be the least expensive overall. The changes wouldn't be so large. They estimate around £8 million to set up the signs, paint the roads, and so on, and at least another £2 million or so to make other changes.
So you're saying it's around £10 million? That seems quite reasonable. What about the park and ride scheme?
Well, there are sites which have been identified for development to build the car parks, and as they're not in the centre, it won't cost too much to buy them, probably around £5 million. Then they just need to lay out the car parks and put in bus shelters, which should be around £6 or £7 million, and then get the buses. If they rent them, they could keep the cost down to around £3 million.
So, if I'm right, that comes to around £15 million for the park and ride in total. And then there's the pedestrian and one-way system. How does that work out?
That's the second highest. We'd have to reroute all the traffic while the works are done, then change the roads along the routes to make it safer for cyclists, which is around £12 million. Then there are the new signs and so on, which comes to about £5 million, and also the road painting and maintenance, at around £8 million.
So that's around £23 million. We might be able to manage that.
Actually, that's £25 million, Robert.
So it is. My mistake. Maths was never my strong point.
So we've discussed the negative aspects and costs of these proposals, but now I'd like to look at the real benefits which we think each proposal will bring.
Well, I really think that one of the most important benefits is better public transport. The most important thing is to get more people out of their cars and onto public transport.
Well, 3 of the proposals would help with that: park and ride, bus and cycle only routes, and the new tram system. Which do you think would be the best out of those 3?
I think the bus and cycle routes would be great for town centre transport, but they might push car traffic further out and make it more difficult for buses outside the centre. That leads me to think that the tram system would actually improve public transport the most, even though it's the most expensive, as there will be a new form of transport in the centre without affecting other parts of town.
I think you have a good point there. I agree that in the long term, it would be the best thing. Do you think that proposal would also increase the amount of visitors in town?
Well, of course. Any of the solutions would do that, but I'm not sure if the tram system would be the best. What do you think?
I think the park and ride would be better than the tram system for that. The trams would help people who are already in town, but a park and ride would bring more of them in from outside.
So you think the park and ride would bring most visitors in?
Actually, I think if people know that they can get around the center more easily, do their shopping and so on, they would come in more. So perhaps the pedestrian area and one-way system would be best in that respect.
True. I've seen other town centres become really busy when they've put in pedestrian areas, so that's clearly the best way of bringing visitors in. So we agree on that then.
And I think that people's health will improve as well, as they will be walking around the pedestrian area rather than driving around town.
Up to a point, yes, but I'm sure you'd agree that encouraging people to do more cycling would help their health far more.
Of course. Creating bus and cycle-only routes would be the best way of getting people to exercise. It would also help reduce pollution, so even the people who don't cycle will breathe cleaner air.
And we agree that producing less pollution is a really important part of this scheme, though I think that the park and ride would be better at doing that than the bus and cycle-only routes.
I'm not sure. Lots of people would need to use the park and ride to help reduce pollution. Bus and cycle-only routes keep cars out of the centre.
Yes, but if people are encouraged to use park and ride more, it would produce the best results. There would be far fewer cars in the centre, and the air would be much cleaner.
Yes, that's true, but that's a lot of work for the council. Okay, we'll agree on a park and ride then. What about safety? I'd say the bus and cycle routes would be the best from that point of view.
Probably. I think I agree with you on that.
Okay then, so we agree on safety.
Actually, no. When I think about it, you have to take pedestrians into account as well. It's safer for cyclists when there are no cars around, but I'm not sure that it's safer for pedestrians. They still have to avoid cyclists, who don't always pay attention to pedestrians. So I really think the pedestrian area and one-way system would be safer for them. Cyclists won't be allowed in the pedestrian areas, so there will only be people walking.
Yes, you have a point there. Shall we change that then?
OK, I'm glad you agree. So that's all done then. We have all our recommendations.
One.
Actually, Robert, that's not quite right.
2.
I think you have a good point there.
3.
On the face of it, yes, but in actual fact, it can make things worse.
4.
What about the second one, a park and ride scheme?
5.
Up to a point, yes, but I'm sure you'd agree that encouraging people to do more cycling would help health far more.
6.
I'm not sure about that. Statistics show that the worst place is by the town hall.